What's up, everybody? This is Ricardo Rodriguez.
And Matthew Messick.
And this is
the Profits Over Wages podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Profits Over Wages podcast, where we do weekly interviews with highly successful business owners and entrepreneurs. We discuss life, business, and entrepreneurship to bring forward the lessons learned from success and failure, and most importantly, have fun while doing it. On episode 32 of the podcast, we talked to Jeff Schechter, also known as Shecky. He's a lifelong entrepreneur and business owner. Shecky first started investing in real estate in the 1980s when he began flipping homes that he lived in. In 2016, he co-founded High Return Real Estate, a turnkey rental investment company in Indianapolis that helps the average person realize consistent 12 to 18% returns with fully rehabbed, hands-off, professionally managed turnkey residential rental properties. High Return Real Estate has been featured on CNN, NBC News, BBC, Fox, Google News Lab, and Forbes. Shecky also co-hosts a podcast, the High Return Real Estate Show. On this episode, we go in depth about investing in turnkey rental properties, the pros, the cons, the numbers, lead generation, property management, etc. We also talk about Jeff's DFY, Done For You model, and how to effectively convert leads into clients. Enjoy the show. Let's start it now. There we go. All right, Jeff. Thank you for being on the podcast. Before we get started, I just want to say thanks for taking the time and, talking to us and getting together.
Yeah, of course.
So I wanted to, we've had somebody that does, that did turnkey investments, on the podcast before, but I think she was just more like a wholesaler, in the real estate terms. So I wanted to get an expert on turnkey properties. So, that's why having you or your partner on the podcast was very attractive for us, because I don't know much about the turnkey segment of real estate investing. So let's talk about how you got into turnkey investments first, and then we can kind of divulge into all the details about turnkey properties. Why did you decide to do turnkey investing in the first place?
Well, my business partner, he was a client of mine. I had some background in the digital marketing space, and I was doing some consulting with him. And he reached out to me one day and said, "Hey, brother, I've been buying some properties in Indianapolis from this group, and it's this turnkey concept. So, they basically do everything. They source the properties, they rehab them, they're giving me a little warranty on them, and then they manage them. And the returns have been amazing. And I've turned around and referred a few other people. And, he had another very, very successful business. And he said, I know, Shecky, you've got this marketing brain. Can I reach out to you and get some ideas? I think there's a business here." Mm-hmm. So that was the seeds of how we got started. We were both entrepreneurs. We had a telephone, relationship from a consulting standpoint, because I was helping him in his other business. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of went from there. And I took a look at it, and I had done a lot of house hacking and stuff back in the 80s, and I had a flipping business in like 08, 09, and pretty much when that last crash happened, had my ass handed to me, just to be frank. And just kind of, I've had this sort of love-hate relationship with real estate investing. And so for a while I had kind of sworn it off, and that's what got me into digital marketing. But there was always that little, voice in the back of the head. There was an understanding that, there's always, no matter what the market is, there's going to be opportunities in real estate investing. And I had never really lost sight of that. I may have been ignoring it, but I had never lost sight of it. So anyway, we worked together. We had we scheduled a 1 hour call that turned into literally about 3.5 hours. I mean, it was either I had too much coffee or whatever, but it was one of those days where we were both just in the zone. Yeah. And incredible, and the ideas were flying. And I, the next day, followed it up with an email of the 10 or 12 bullet points and ideas that I had given him to be able to roll out a business like this. And the very next day, I got an email back from him saying, "Okay, let's do it." And I was like, "Well, let's do what?" And he was like, I want you to be my business partner. I already talked to the guys in Indianapolis. They don't mind supplying us, but let's set up this sales organization to basically promote their stuff." Mm-hmm. And that was the seeds of how we got started.
Yeah, one of the things that, that attracted me to real estate in the first place was that there is so many avenues so many things that you can do, right? You could just focus on one sector of the business, like either wholesaling, flipping rentals or turnkey rentals. I mean, there's just so many avenues where you can make money, and a lot of them, they could differ depending on what market, what the market is doing right now. So, um, that's probably one of the things that attracted me the most to real estate investing. Now, let's let's talk about what you did before. So let's get a little bit into like your background, because when you mentioned that you had been investing in real estate since the 80s, but was that mostly house hacking, like where you bought like a 3-unit, rent out 2, and lived on 1, or?
No, I just was always intrigued by the single family flip. Part of it is just because I was interested more in, kind of the design side and making things look really cool on the inside. And so what I would do is I would just buy houses that needed a bunch of work or they needed a lot of updating. And I would find ways to buy them relatively inexpensively. Not necessarily distressed, whatever. Back then I didn't know as much, and I was still buying through realtors, but I would typically live in them for a couple of years. And, the first year I would fix them up pretty nice. Then I would spend another year kind of enjoying it. Mm-hmm. And then, obviously resell it in such a way that I could make a decent profit and move on and do it again. So, during kind of the late 80s, early 90s, I probably had, 5 or 6 different primary residences that I did it. And so, you kind of got to be willing to live through some construction dust and things like that, and have sections of your home plasticed off that you're not just going to use for a while. But, I enjoyed it. It seemed to work out fine. And there were some really fun projects. These were mostly down in Texas, but they turned out really nice.
And was that because of the whole, because when you have a flip and it's like your primary residence, right? At the 2-year mark, that's when you're able to avoid capital gains tax, right? When you sell it. Was that one of the reasons why, or was that just sort of like your strategy?
Well, let's just say this. I mean, that was a lot of years ago, and I'm a lot smarter now. So, admittedly, I can't go back and go, oh, I was so savvy that was my primary motivation. I was just an idiot with a plan, like it really, I had an eye for that stuff and I enjoyed it. So, obviously there's certain aspects I didn't enjoy in dealing with contractors and things like that, but they turned out well and the projects were kind of fun and I enjoyed them. I think, maybe somehow the universe was watching out for me and they all end up taking a little bit longer than 2 years. And so as a result, I was able to avoid some taxation. But I can't honestly say that I was really that sharp.
Gotcha. Now, let's get back into turnkey properties because, we don't know much about it. So I'm very curious. What would you say are some of the pros and cons of investing in turnkey properties?
Well, I'm a little biased, but I think that, I don't see too many cons. I think it's just a matter of matching up the right buyer to the system. So as you stated so clearly, there are millions of different ways to make money in the real estate industry. Mm-hmm. And, there's flipping and notes and, wholesaling and all kinds of craziness. But within those different strategies, there is also a different level of work and commitment and different levels of risk and different levels of financial exposure. So when you look at that landscape, you have to figure out where you are in that spectrum. That's the first thing. So turnkey in our world means that we are taking care of everything for the investor. We are only appealing to investors that are looking for the absolute best rental real estate property that they can own that's going to generate the best returns, the longest stability, and they're looking for cash flow. They're not necessarily looking to be some giant real estate expert. They would like to build a portfolio, but for the most part, they are looking for passive income. They don't really want to be involved in the process. So a company like ours is essentially complete DFY, not DIY, done for you. So our team, we do everything. We go out and we source the property. We're able to buy it very, very inexpensively because we buy a lot of them at a time, and we pay all cash for these properties. We then rehab them to our strict standards. We then have them inspected by a third party so that we can make sure that our crews obviously did a good job, because we're going to be offering a warranty on the entire property to the investor when we sell it to them, right? And the investor also wants to see some transparency from a third party that they know the property is in good shape. Then we rent it out. We get a good tenant in there, and we professionally manage it for them. So this thing is basically, just a little ATM machine for them. They put their money in. They're owning whether a single family home or duplex is typically the kinds of product that we deal with. Mm-hmm. And they don't really have to do anything except, write a couple of tax checks every year. And then that's about it. And all the information for them is all accessible online. They have a portal where they can see all the activity on their property, and who's renting, and are they on time, and were there any little minor repairs done, whatever. So it's all completely done for them.
So what does a typical cash flow turnkey property look like for your investor for as far as cash flow and returns?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's probably one of the biggest reasons why we most heavily operate in Indianapolis, is because the pricing here is very, very reasonable comparatively, but more importantly, the rent to price ratio, or price to rent ratio, is so ridiculously attractive. So typically we are in mostly C-class properties. We're within 15, 20 minutes of downtown Indianapolis. Pricing will run for singles and duplexes, finished, rehabbed, ready to go, typically between about $45,000 and $75,000. And depending on, whether it's a single or a double, we'll see anywhere between 10%, maybe 9.5% on the low side, all the way up to maybe like 13% cash on cash ROI. But that's, full disclosure, that's with everything. So in other words, we show our investors, hey, look, you're going to have to put away a percentage for future repairs. There is 10% going to management company. There are taxes. There is insurance. So we actually put all of that information onto our little mini pro formas that are on our website, so they can really see exactly what they're looking at and make a very, very fair assessment. Because again, the reality is our customer is not looking to be a real estate expert. They're just looking for value from a standpoint of the investment, and they know that what we can offer them is something very stable.
What is a typical, or just an example deal would look like, say, as far as like the monthly cash flow and all those things?
Yeah, so let's just talk about like a nice little single family home, maybe a C-class property. Let's say you're probably looking at 52, 55,000, somewhere in there, sometimes even 48,000 to purchase. And you could expect probably 7 to 750, maybe if it's real nice, 775 a month in rent. So, like I said, on those numbers, after you take all the expenses out, you're probably looking at about, 10 or 11% cash on cash ROI.
And then you said you buy your deals in bulk. Is that from are those REOs from the bank, or where do you source your deals from?
Well, we have obviously a full acquisition team, but there's a number of ways that we do it. There's some REO stuff. There's some, marketing like any other wholesaler would do out to distressed sellers, tax sales, things like that. We've also had really good luck because we have really great relationships with some of the bigger hedge funds. And as you know, those big companies will tend to move a lot of product at one time. And because we have those relationships, we're obviously able to buy from them in bulk as well. So it works out pretty well.
There's turnkey providers, right? Like you guys, but then there's also, I guess there's a segment of turnkey wholesalers, if you would, like, if that's like a term. What would you say, like, how can you identify like a good turnkey property? Like, what are some of the good things to look for, and maybe some of the red flags to look at, when it comes to looking at turnkey property providers?
Well, you asked two questions in there, maybe without realizing it. So I want to
I'm kind of just
address both of the issues, right? So for people that are out there that are looking for a turnkey provider, so let's first talk about who the provider is. In our case, myself, my business partner, we have all of our own crews. We have our own acquisition team. We run our own rehab crews. The only thing that's really not part of our process is third-party inspectors that come in and check our work, and so that we can show that validation to our investor base. But even our management, that's all part of our same group. So what's happening as a result is that's what I would call true turnkey. We are the ones that you would be coming to directly to do business with. And as a result, I know this because I see what our competitors are doing. That's where you will get the best deals. Absolutely. There is no question about it. And very simply because, turnkey, that term, not only has it been somewhat bastardized because there are, obviously a lot of people with different definitions. I just defined to you that we control the entire process. And so in my mind, that's really a fair definition, an accurate definition of what turnkey is. Many people will play around with that definition. The reason that they're playing around with that definition is because there are also many marketers of turnkey properties that are not truly turnkey providers. They're simply just marketers. And, let's face it, look, I've got a digital marketing background. I mean, you guys had a great guest on that talked about SEO and all that stuff. And so, we all know that it's all about posturing on the internet and getting good traffic and appearing as an expert. I mean, that's kind of a lot of the big play nowadays. And with good reason. It builds authority. There's no question. But there are a number of players that are out there that are what I would call real estate promoters, real estate educators, that aren't necessarily selling their own products. And interestingly, I get calls probably once a week from many of these other providers. They're not really in the turnkey business, but if you go on their website, they're in the turnkey business. And so what they're doing is they're aggregating a lot of the true providers like ourselves, and then of course adding another $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 markup to the property to make it worth their time. And so, typically in these conversations, I just say to them, okay, look, if we're getting involved with you somehow, there's got to be three wins. I mean, you guys get it. You're straightforward businessmen. And, if you're going to do a deal with anybody, there's got to be a win all the way around, right? So number one is we want to put the investors first. So is the investor well served by this extra layer? Well, no, they're not. That's a lose for the investor. Now it's a win for the quote unquote marketer that's peddling it, right? Because they're getting their markup just by means of having a good marketing channel, right? But in the interim, we also lose too as a company because we've done all this work to bring this to source and bring this great property that's a fantastic investment to the marketplace, and the sale is not being associated to our own branding. So sorry, not to be rude, but why the F would I want that? I don't. So, we've just gotten away when we first got started and didn't have very many leads and we're still kind of figuring out our way. Then, yeah, I mean, we maybe entertained having some people, refer us in, things like that. But we got away from that very, very quickly and we do all of our own stuff. We don't have any other, relationships with any of the other bigger educators out there repeddling our stuff because really the investor is not served by that situation.
Yeah, because I don't know if it was before we started the podcast or after we started the podcast, but you mentioned that all your leads right now are being created organically.
Yeah.
Right? Like you haven't paid for advertising in 2 years. Like you're just now starting to look at advertising. How did you do that? Right? Because it's like, I mean, that's a pretty good position to be in.
Yeah, it's great. First of all, it was an aversion to having somebody else peddle our stuff. Number one, like my business partner and I knew we wanted to create a brand. And, like you guys, we also have a podcast too. And so, we have a certain way that we like to talk and our look and feel of our website and really what we're doing. And yeah, we know we got started, we made a bunch of mistakes, but we knew we always had a channel from a standpoint of who exactly is our customer. Like, we were very familiar with who our customer was, and we were very familiar with what they wanted because we were both customers of that same process. We were both exactly in that mindset already. We were real estate investors, and we were just looking for somebody to do it all for us. We were busy with other businesses, right? So we wanted that whole turnkey aspect. So we decided what we wanted to do was build a site that had a really, really positive experience. But let's look and say, what is this customer? What kind of search terms are they looking for? And how can we build a website and experience that appeals to those keywords? So we just got on board with really the best search engine optimization guys. And we really knew, like, look, I want to be clear for anybody listening, this is a long-term play. Like, there's a lot of people out in digital marketing land that would argue with me and say, you should start right away with PPC, with pay-per-click, right? Because, you put $1 in and you can see what the traffic is. And we were doing some business initially by word of mouth, and we really felt we knew we were going to be in it for the long haul. So we just felt like in the bigger picture, once we had some really good traction to our site and leads and understood the kinds of people we were going with, we would have a better idea of the kinds of keywords that would be working, the kinds of content that our audience would be drawn to, so that when we got to the point where we were really ready to scale up our business, which is right now, we would already have that data and be able to take that and then do pay-per-click in a much more efficient way because of the previous knowledge that we already had. That's a long-winded answer, but I hope that makes sense.
No, I mean, it makes sense. Just the fact that we just had somebody on SEO it helps me understand it a little bit better. I mean, obviously that's your background. But let's kind of keep talking about that. How did your background on digital marketing has helped you with this business now? Because a lot of people ignore digital marketing or any SEO, or like their website is just like a one-page little thing, and then they wonder why they don't get any leads online. But like, how has that background helped you?
Well, we should back up and just say, how the heck did I do it anyway? And ironically, it was partially because of a frustration with real estate. So I think we talked briefly that, after I had done some of that house hacking back in the 80s, later into the mid 2000s, I had a flipping business with another business partner down in Texas. And we got caught in that last crash. And, it was really, really a difficult period for me. But I saw that there were others not getting necessarily clipped as badly as we were. But those were all people that obviously had better marketing channels. We were just, when we got a property finished, obviously we were just kind of using typical realtors and, letting somebody else peddle our property for us because that wasn't really our wheelhouse. And so after basically starting over in 2009 with some really crappy credit and kind of swearing off real estate for a while, I was very, very curious about the internet and how it worked and about the psychology of things. And, this is when, e-commerce then, I mean, that's like 10 years ago, it was not a household word like it is now. And, so I just was really curious about it. I ended up moving from San Antonio to Austin because there was just this amazing community of digital marketers and entrepreneurs in Austin that were doing some really cool things with internet marketing. And I just started masterminding and working on projects with them and really living on very little money, but I wanted to learn and ended up working for some friends. And that's how I ended up getting into the consulting side, is after, getting some experience under my belt. But then when Jack, my business partner, reached out to me with this, it kind of all came together. It's like, how can I take what I've learned the last few years in Austin and apply this. And, ironically, I don't know how spiritual you guys are, and I'm not intending necessarily to get super woo-woo, but from a manifestation standpoint, when I started getting not frustrated, but just knew I was ready for the next level after this little consulting gig, I just wrote up on my whiteboard, in my office, which was at home, just a few things I wanted in my next opportunity, because I've been self-employed essentially, other than some reasons to take sales jobs to fuel my entrepreneurial habit. I've essentially been self-employed my entire life. Or my entire adult life. So I wrote up on the board, hey, I want to leverage my consultative selling skills. I want to leverage what I know about real estate, not real estate investing. I didn't even have that up there. I wanted to sell a high ticket item. I wanted to be the best in my space. I wanted to leverage my digital marketing skills. And oh, by the way, I don't really want to work alone. I want a solid business partner. And that's all I put up there. They were very generic. And I just forgot about it. It's not like I was meditating on this or practicing all this manifestation stuff every day. And 6 weeks later, I get this call from Jack going, hey, I want to talk to you about this. And when that email came back that said, hey, let's do this, let's be partners, I'm reading this email and I'm looking up at my board going, wow. It just was incredible how it all came together. So that's kind of the longer version of how this all evolved.
It's pretty crazy, because we actually had somebody that used to can you tell that story about Lane Etheridge, how he used to walk with this yardstick?
Yeah, have you ever heard of that book, The 3 Feet of Gold?
Yeah.
So this guy read it and he thought it was awesome. So he spoke on stages. So he started carrying around a yardstick with him, because it's yardstick's 3 feet. And then after this one speech in particular, 5 people came up to him afterwards, and the first 4 asked, what are you doing with this yardstick? And he explained to him, oh, I have it because of this book. Then he told the 5th guy that, and the 5th guy was like, oh, I wrote that book.
Wow.
And then, so that author, Greg Reed, actually then mentored him for a number of years, and he became his mentor. So literally by carrying that around, the law of attraction, that's the most law of attraction direct story that I ever heard. So you can make kind of your own destiny, what you are looking for, just by putting yourself out there and trying to make that connection.
Yeah, it's interesting, the physical connection to the physical object that creates it, because there's obviously an energy there that attracted that author just by carrying that stick around.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I just thought it was funny to talk about this, since you were talking about
Yeah, it's a great story.
But let's talk about some of the skills that I guess translated from your digital marketing experience into your business now. What are some of the things that you have applied from then till now?
Yeah, so I had alluded to this earlier. I admittedly am not the geekiest guy. I like organization, but for me to look at a spreadsheet full of numbers, what's this earning per click and all that other kind of stuff, I understand all those metrics, but that shit makes my eyes cross. I'm just, just tell me the answers, tell me the main theme of what we're getting at and we'll move on. I'm much more drawn to the psychology side of what makes people go to websites, what makes them convert, what makes them want to reach out and become a lead or fill out a form or whatever. And, obviously that requires a lot of testing, but you have to almost back up from a step first. And what I was talking about earlier is you have to really, really understand who your customer is. And most importantly, a lot of people say that if listeners right now are automatically as entrepreneurs, they go into their head and they start saying, well, my perfect customer is 45 years old, they're married, they make $175,000 a year, whatever. That's great. Okay. But that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is that may be the demographics of the person that you're targeting for ads, but does it really get into the psyche of who that person is? What I want to know is what keeps that person up at night. Mm-hmm. What is their biggest problem? What is their biggest issue that they're trying to solve, right? So we know in our world that these are obviously investors that they want to build a portfolio, but they're busy and they don't necessarily have the time. So what keeps them up at night are things like, how can I find a good deal? How can I work with people that I trust? How can I look at a situation that's transparent and safe, right? These are because there's a lot of charlatans out there, right? And like I said, there's a lot of people even just marketing stuff that's not theirs. I'm not suggesting they're charlatans. I'm just suggesting that there's a lot of ways to skin the cat. So we're going out there and putting our best foot forward, and within our marketing, we're pushing all those buttons for people to understand that, look, this is a safe haven for you. If you've been looking for deals, if you've been talking to others, if you've been searching, if you're just trying to find a good, solid rental property, that's a good value that's going to give you good return, your search is now ended, right? Because all these little questions that you had being on other sites and talking to other providers, whatever, here it is. It's now you're in the safe zone.
So you want to put yourself in their place and kind of try to ask yourself the questions that they might be asking themselves.
Yeah, you really want to find out what is it that's their biggest problem? What is it that's keeping them up at night? So if you can really start identifying those psychological triggers and gear your content around showing them that there is obviously a healthy response to those things, to those what might be objections, and they typically are, then you've got something really good there. And so that's a lot of what I studied from some of the great marketers out there. And I saw what they were doing. And, you can get into a much deeper discussion about language and neurolinguistic programming and all kinds of stuff. But at the very core, it really starts with solving your customer's biggest problems.
Gotcha. Now let's go back to Turnkey Properties and your company. So how does that process work? Say I have $300,000 in the bank right now and I want to invest on some Turnkey Properties and I come to you guys. How does that process go from start to finish?
Yeah, it's actually very, very simple. So, obviously we start with the premise that the only properties we sell are ones that are already finished. So, we're not getting into this whole situation where we're partnering up with other people on rehabs or any of that kind of stuff. Again, keep in mind the turnkey model. So the only thing we're selling is properties that have just crossed the finish line. In other words, they've been sourced, they've been rehabbed, they've been inspected. Any issues on the inspection were cured. They're, before or after pictures, good to go, right? So an investor would somehow end up on our site, right? Currently, typically, mostly because they put in some search term. And they'll end up on our properties page where they'll see some samples of what we call a CFO, which is just a little mini one-page pro forma. We use the language CFO, meaning cash flow opportunity. We show a basic couple pictures. We show a little, just kind of a data sheet about what the property's all about. And if they have interest in that property, they're going to basically fill out a form and reach out to us. And then our investor relations team calls them, emails them, but the first thing they do is they get on the phone. I mean, we're very person to person. We get all of our leads online, but we understand that we're in the trust business and we want to have a conversation with them. We want to make sure, like, if you've got $300,000, great. We don't even necessarily want you to spend all $300,000 right at once. Maybe buy two $50,000 properties with us and start off with $100,000 and see how it goes. And let's learn each other's processes, things like that. So first you'll have a call, typically with investor relations. And as long as everything is okay, Nicole, who heads up our investor relations right now, will basically just open up a portal for you where you can see everything about a particular property. Hopefully it's the one you responded on, but that might already be sold. But we'll try and put something else very, very similar in front of you. And now you're going to see everything. So you're going to see a whole list of, you're going to see not just the CFO, but you're going to see more in-depth pictures. You're going to see all of the contracts, like what does our purchase agreement look like? What does our lease agreement look like with our renters? What does our property management agreement look like? How do we handle taxes in Indiana? Just a little quick document on that, right? Just everything you need to know about standardized contracts. and then a whole nother link where it's everything about that property. What was the scope of repairs that was done to it? What does the warranty on this property look like? What did the inspection report show? Like, it's very simple. It's all just completely laid out for you. Should you decide that that's the property that you want, you just let us know. We send you a purchase agreement on it digitally. It just goes through DocuSign. You sign it on your side. We sign it on our side. It goes right to the title company. And then we have an investor concierge. Her name's Kat. She's amazing, by the way. And she basically walks you through the closing process. Just make sure you saw the insurance quote, and are you getting your properties insured? Did you get turned over to the property management division? Did you sign your property management contracts? Did you wire funds to the title company? Things like that. So, it should be stated too, from a cleanliness standpoint, our properties are sold all cash. So there is no issue with, waiting for banks or financing or all that. It's very, very clean. And once an investor decides they want to buy the property, we're usually closing a few days later. It's very, very quick. And they're anxious to close too, because many of the properties that we have are either leased already, right? Or they're, just coming off a rehab and about to be leased. And so, they're anxious to get into that whole cash flow situation. So in their respect, they have no reason to want to delay a closing. Everybody's anxious to get to the closing table quickly.
So after they purchase, what's the communication? Are they getting, cash flow checks from the property?
Yeah, so they get turned over to our property management division. And then basically there's another portal that gets opened up, not the same portal that we showed them the property on, but now there's a property management portal as well. And they speak with people on our PM team. They sign their PM contracts, and they give them their bank account number so they can direct deposit any of the proceeds. So basically, they go and collect rents at the beginning of the month. And then, by the third or fourth week of the month, all the processing has happened, and the rent checks less the management fees, less the 10% management fees, are going directly into the investor's account. And that same portal shows all the other activity as far as, did the renter open up a service ticket, or, are we changing renters? Are we putting a new tenant in? Whatever, all the activity that's happening on your property is visible through that portal. But you also have people behind it too, if you want to speak with somebody directly.
Nice. What's the typical amount of time, like after you get a property and you're putting it up for sale on your site, to identify an investor to purchase it? Like, say your internal days on market for your Turnkey Properties.
Well, just for clarity, are you asking like how long does something last on our site before it gets sold?
Yeah, basically.
Sometimes 5 minutes. I mean, like, it's ridiculous. We are, as I mentioned, we're scaling up our company, but ever since we made this decision to put all this in place. So, this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, is how can you make the investor, put him or her in a situation where all of their fears and trust and everything that they could possibly ask about a property, it's all just kind of laid out for them. And we tell them, look, you still want to do your due diligence. What does your due diligence look like? Okay, you want to look at a crime map or whatever. If you're not sure, just come see us. We'll drive around, we'll look at some stuff. But the beauty of our situation is because we have good marketing, and because especially we're just so transparent about what we do, we just put everything out there, that once an investor has already had a conversation with us, right, and we say, okay, look, this is one that's coming up right now. Let me send you the information. Let me open up the portal. It doesn't take them very long to make that decision. I mean, at tops, maybe 48 hours from that point to, like I said, the other day we had a situation where, we had an investor that, was very interested in doing business with us. They looked at all of our stuff. Hey, I like what you're up to. Great. And Nicole sent him over some information on this property. And literally 5 minutes later, he was emailing back saying, great, send me a purchase agreement. So we're having a very difficult time keeping properties current that are available on our website. We're so much so that we're almost to a point where there's a couple of them that we're trying not to sell just so that we can actually have something on our website that's actually available and not already showing pending the moment it gets up on the site.
It's a good problem to have.
It's a great problem to have. And right now we are, we know we've got obviously a very, very proven model. So now it's just a matter of scaling up. So now we're starting to get more aggressive about our acquisitions. And we're building in some software that allows for these portals to work better. And we're putting a lot of our own, task lists and stuff in place in some software that's designed to run a business like ours. So, we're definitely putting on our big boy and big girl panties right now and looking to really take it to the next level. And we are, right on the precipice of becoming certainly a well-known national company because of what we do. And we've shaken some things up because of that transparency, and that's a good thing.
I think someone who, say, has no experience in buying turnkey properties but is interested in it, an obvious question they might have are, if all these questions or if all these properties are so good with like high returns, why is it that you sell them and not just keep them all for yourself? Like, how would you respond to that?
It's a great question, and we do get it often. And interestingly, people on the outside think, "Oh, well, you guys are going to cherry pick, right? Like myself and my business partner, you guys are just going to take all the best properties for yourself, and then you're going to sell us all the stuff that maybe doesn't perform as well." And actually, the opposite is true. So Jack and I obviously started off by owning properties and, working on building our own portfolios. And we continue to do that to this day. But with the system that we have in place, obviously our business is reliant on the sale. We make very little, really almost nothing, to be transparent, on our property management division. It's there really to keep investors happy. So we don't put a lot of markup into, like what another property management company might do is like, a toilet call becomes $225 as opposed to, like, through us, it's maybe, $89. We're just trying to keep the investor into cash flow because we've proven that they're always going to buy more properties as long as they're happy and they have good cash flow. So what ends up happening is the properties that are really going through our system that are the best deals, those are the ones we sell to the general public because we're building a national company and we're building a reputation. So you can imagine we don't have like tons of markup, but if we were going to hold on to a property, we're going to make, our $500, $600, $700 a month, right? Whatever it is. But when we sell a property to an investor, we may be making, 2-3 years worth of rent all at one time by flipping it to the investor. So we're getting, in our minds, that's how we justify it. It's not only it's better for the investor, but we get to do both. So we'll buy some of the other properties, and maybe if one's not so good, it's not going to make it to our website. We'll just keep it in our inventory. Maybe it's performing at 8 or 9%, but it's not necessarily one that we will really feel proud of selling. And so that's typically how it works. We're just building a national company, and like I said, we can get 2-3 years worth of rent at one time, and we can generate some really, really serious revenues by scaling this thing up. So, and those revenues then for us personally allow us to go and build out our own personal portfolios as well. So there's really abundance on all sides.
What are some of the questions that you typically get from a turnkey investor that we haven't asked, or maybe that we haven't even thought of?
That's a good question. At this point, there's very few left. One of the biggest ones that as we were growing, that we used to get, we really fell under, why should I buy from you? And, how much are you guys going to stand behind this warranty? Mm-hmm. So, it's again, they just go back to trust issues. So, we decided that okay, we're just going to now, instead of just giving people a verbal, we're going to make it official. So we have a warranty card. It's even on our FAQ. You could actually go see a sample of the warranty that we issue. And then when the person closes on the property, they're actually getting that version with that address right on it. They're getting a legal document that states what we do. And then the other one was, the more obvious was, we'd always be asking questions about inspections. So we originally would just allow, when a property was coming finished, the investor to obviously always have the ability to have the property inspected. But what we found is that there's obviously a variety of different inspectors. And when you get an inspector that sometimes they really want to just justify their existence and they start finding problems. And you guys know this because you're on that side of the business. It's like, my God, really? Like there was an ant crawling down the road 3 doors down. So they're now recommending pest control remediation, and, we're just like in these little C-class properties that are, renting to, typically blue collar workers. So like clear, we ain't no bones about it. It's not the freaking Taj Mahal here, guys. I mean, they're just little rental properties that are very simple. Right. So, so we found that created a lot of sort of gunking up of our sales process. It's not that the properties wouldn't inspect. It was just like by the time we went back and had the conversation with the investor and then sent our crews back and blah, blah, blah. It just got to be this whole 3-ring circus. So we just put in our processes, look, we're going to hire, there's 3 or 4 different inspectors that we work with that give us a really great overview of the condition of the property. And it's going to speak to every single major operating system of the property, roof, foundation, electrical, plumbing, all that stuff, right? Because those are the things that we warrant. And we're going to use this for both sides. We're going to show it to you up front so you don't have to go out and hire somebody else, right? Which really shortens our sales process, which really shortens the time we own the property, which really reduces our hold time, which also helps us keep our prices down, right? So we're again trying to do the best thing for all of our investors. So we needed to have a way to do that. But it also created a benchmark, a standard by which our crews could live by. It's like, look, guys, if this thing isn't going to pass inspection, guess what? You're going back and working on this crap for free because we got to warrant these properties. So let's just get it done right the first time. And that's not to say that they always get it done right the first time, but we will not sell the property until any of the items that came up on the inspection are cured. And that way, it's all the questions have been handled up front. The only typical other question that I get is, crime stuff. Like obviously Indianapolis, where most of our properties are, it's a major city. There are areas where there's more crime than others. And when you deal with C-class, you're going to be in a situation where you're obviously going to be crossing over areas that are, fall out into probably higher than average crime. But what they don't understand, and this is the beauty of working with a turnkey company that is on the streets right there, that knows everything street by street. And you guys know this from your experience in Chicago too. Sometimes you can be on one street in a zip code and things are starting to churn and it's not too bad. And there's some opportunity there. And 3 streets over, it's a flipping war zone. Yeah. And, it's nothing but hookers and blow, right? So, and it's just like, you don't want to be there. And so we just, we stay away from those areas too, but admittedly, we are near those areas. We are near those areas in an educated and meaningful way by intent.
Now, going back to the inspection, wouldn't somebody say that the inspection would be a little bit biased since you're the one who gets it done and not them? I'm just thinking from like their perspective.
No, it's a great question, and it happens. Honestly, that's kind of where we draw the line. I mean, look, the reality is, like 3 days ago, I'll give you a for instance. There's been, I'm not going to name names, but there was another well-known turnkey provider in our area and one who's national who sells a lot of properties all over, including Indiana, and they've done some pretty shady things. So there's a bit of a black eye on the turnkey industry in general and a little bit about Indianapolis. So we had a guy who went all the way through the process and he's getting ready to sign paperwork and he's like, that's the same title company that was used by these other guys that scammed me. I'm out. Okay. It's like, look, dude, if that's a problem, it's not a big deal. We can always use another title company. I mean, this just happens to be the one that knows our processes and we like them and we send them a lot of business, but we have alternates. And so for whatever reason, he was just soured. So ironically, not ironically, but as you could probably imagine, that property sold literally 5 hours later to somebody else. Like, we just can't afford, if we're going to keep our prices down, we have to keep putting these in front of the investors. And there's other hungry investors that are so appreciative of all the stuff we've done all the way through, because let's face it, it's a lot of moving parts. This is not an easy business. Like I said, when we got started, we were just a sales arm, just like a lot of these other ones, for another company that was just doing really crappy stuff. And we got away from them very, very quickly. So we had to develop all of our own processes, and we've really refined them. So if somebody comes to me and says, that's great, I want to have my own inspection, the first thing we tell them is like, look, this is not us. It's a third party, okay? And frankly, we're at the point, and I'm not trying saying this to be an ass or anything like that, but if we've gone through this entire process and you still don't trust us, we're probably not the right company for you to be doing business with.
True.
And thankfully, we've got enough leads to be able to say that, but it's not, and again, I'm not trying to be a dick, but I'm just saying that we work our asses off to put a great product in front of these people. And I think when people speak with us, and Nicole, or speak with myself or Jack directly, and they see our website, we're very real people, and they get that. They get that feeling from us. If for whatever reason they're not getting that, either A, we haven't really done our job, or B, they're just so ridiculously jaded that I don't really want to do business with them anyway, because those people end up becoming the problem children, and they're never happy no matter what you do. I talk to a lot of investors on the phone, and like, there's nothing, and you guys probably get this too because you have a podcast, there's nothing greater than meeting somebody for coffee or getting on the phone that goes, man, I listen to your podcast, I see what you guys are up to, and dude, I just got to tell you, man, I really appreciate what you're up to. Like, I know you guys get feedback like that, and like that's the kind of, like, you could take all the money in the world and it's great to make money, but that's when I go, like, I'm doing the right thing. This is great, right? And those are the people we want to do business with.
Yeah,
Like,
we just got one yesterday. It was pretty good. That lets you know that everything, it's all worth it, and you're doing the right thing, and you're inspiring people.
Yeah, and there's always going to be naysayers, and you just got to kind of keep moving forward. You're doing the right thing. Just like my business partner says, stay in your lane, right? And so that's what we do. We have these inexpensive properties in certain parts of town. They're not necessarily the prettiest, but they're little ATM machines. They're sold all cash. That's all we do. We stay in our lane. And there's a lot of people out there that really appreciate what we do, and there's a few that don't, and all of that is perfect.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah, let's get into the questions, because it's around that time. So we have a few questions we'll ask you. What do you wish you knew before you got started?
That one's a double-edged sword. My business partner and I joke around all the time that if we knew what we knew now, we would have never started. Because like I said, I think I alluded to it, we originally started buying from another sort of half-assed turnkey group here, and we were peddling their stuff. And actually, those are the same people that are under investigation, and there's all kinds of crap. And, we obviously got away from them very quickly. But had I known that they were going to be as problematic as they were, we would have never gotten started. So I'm going to answer your question with, there is nothing. Ignorance is bliss to a certain extent. If you've got an idea and you are an entrepreneur, you, to a certain extent, are, let's face it, you're going on your gut. And you're also going with that same, 3 feet of gold type mentality, right? Like, you just got to, the gold's just on the other side. You just got to keep going. So, to a certain extent, you just have to accept that. And so I think the one thing that you need to know is that just know that you're not going to know and be okay with that.
I like that.
What was the worst piece of advice that you ever got?
The worst piece of advice I ever got is I am the right guy to go into business with, and I will take very, very good care of you. And that was a gentleman that back in 05 through 09, I was business partners with in my flipping business. And it just was not a good fit for me. I knew less then. I was too trusting. Not that there's anything wrong with being positive, but much of the advice that he gave me was very, very bad, only because he was not a very honest man. And that fleshed out obviously later, but it cost me quite a bit of money. But again, is that bad advice? Well, all of these crappy things that happen, you can either use them as lessons or you can use them for remorse. It's your choice.
There's one thing I like that one of the previous guests that we had said, and he said, be a short-term skeptic, but a long-term optimist. And I like that saying. I don't know, it just popped into my head when you said
Yeah, no, I like it. I basically think now I am very cautiously optimistic.
Exactly. I like that. Matt?
What habits helped make you successful?
I think for me, there's so many moving parts because I'm the CEO of our company and I'm also obviously oversee all the marketing. So there's a lot of moving pieces. And I think two things for the entrepreneurs in this position. Number one is just get up and have your list. I mean, my stuff is just super simple. I just use a little yellow legal pad. And the night before, I just kind of go, what have I got to get done tomorrow? What are the top 4 or 5 things? Because if I start going through all these lists and I got 100 things I'm trying to achieve, whatever, I'm just going to look at that and I'm going to start crying. I'm going to just be completely overwhelmed. So I've just learned, what are the top 3, 4 things I want to get done tomorrow, and just start on the big stuff in the morning and try and get them done because the day is going to get away from you. That's my whole system. It's completely simple. The other part B to that is, who is it on your team that you could probably delegate this to that might do a better job than you, even though you may not initially think as entrepreneurs, we think we have to do everything ourselves, but how could I empower somebody else to do this better than me, and challenge them to say, hey, here's how I'm doing it. Could you take this over and do it better than me, and start leveraging your time a little bit better? And if you don't have that person on your team, how could you go find that person? So, I'm just always looking for ways to constantly create efficiencies within some of the tasks that I am burdened with.
Why do you do what you do? What gets you through the tough times?
Well, hearing what we said earlier and having investors and other people that say, man, I just love what you guys are up to. And I love that you're making my retirement, my building a portfolio so ridiculously easy. That's the kind of stuff that I wow. I mean, there's stocks and there's Wall Street and there's crypto and there's all this craziness out there. And this is not to slam any of them, but it's to say we know we are helping, a lot of people that are in middle America or even upper middle America to be in a situation where they can have a far better life and create cash flow than what they could do on their own with their present resources. So that's the kind of stuff that gets me jazzed. The other thing is, because we're building systems, and look, I'm just going to be completely selfish. I'm building a life like that for myself too. Jack and I joke around about this, how can we get enough of a great team in place where the only thing we really do in our day is show up for podcasts and, maybe the occasional, management meeting, and then, just meeting with some of the more, well-heeled investors, and that's it. And the rest of the time, we're traveling and hanging out with family and, doing the stuff we really love to do, because it's, it's all about balance. So, I've had some really tough financial times in my life and some other health challenges. And, it's like when you have good health and, decent income and good relationships, like, I mean, who cares about the fancy car? Like I'm not that guy that's, got to be living in the mansion, driving the fancy car. For me, it's about freedom and lifestyle. Like, can I go to yoga in the middle of the day? Can I hang out and play guitar with my friends? Can I go work from the beach for a week? Like, that's the kind of stuff that gets me excited.
Definitely.
What is one thing that you find to be true that most people would disagree with?
In the investor community specific to ours, when you get into a lot of the real estate forums, there's a common system called the BRRRR method, BRRRR. And here in what we do, there's a and I'm not saying there aren't exceptions, but there's a big misnomer in the investment community that you're going to be able to force a lot more equity out of a property using the BRRRR method yourself, sourcing it yourself, using a contractor, doing all that stuff, and then getting it rented out to a property management company, like if you're coming from out of town, than if you were buying from a true turnkey. So that's where I feel like there's a significant untruth. It might be true in certain more expensive properties, but because we're buying so many at volume and we're rehabbing so many at volume, there's so many economies of scale built in. And because we've got our systems so built in, we're not making any mistakes. And even if we made a slight mistake, that's not, again, Jack and I are just keeping that in our personal portfolio. So it's the primo stuff that's really put out there for the public. I regularly have investors reaching out to me going like, hey, how can we do all this stuff together? Let's do a BRRRR thing together. And I'm like, no, dude, we're not doing that. If you want to do that, go ahead and add yourself to the list of the other 100 dead bodies that have tried to come to Indianapolis and do that. You're one guy buying from a wholesaler. You're then one guy dealing with a contractor. You're then one guy dealing with a for-profit property management company. Good luck. Let me know how it turns out, because I can already tell you how it's going to turn out. It may turn out just fine, but it's the price you end up in at is going to be probably within $500 of what we were able to sell you that property for because of our economies of scale. And then now you're stuck with a for-profit property management system. So go for it. Knock yourself out.
Do you have a favorite failure? Is there one that set you up for future success?
Well, I think the one I talked about earlier, the one that got us into the business that we're in now, because like we didn't know any better, that was really it was our biggest success because of what it allowed us to do, but it's also been our biggest nightmare, because if we go back 2 years, there are still investors now from when we were recommending these guys that are feeling the heat of the implosion of this other system. So again, there was a lot of, I'm not pointing fingers because, I don't want to get into a whole legal thing, but there was a lot of things done that should not have been done. And we were recommending them because we didn't know any better. So we've gone back to every single one of those early investors and said, look, we know it's an issue. Let's fix this together. It doesn't mean that we have any responsibility to fix it from a legal standpoint, because they bought properties and they signed back then as is documents. There weren't inspections back then, et cetera, et cetera. But we just feel a sense of obligation from a standpoint of our reputation and what we're doing and what we're building moving forward, that we have an obligation to these people to help them through this. So we're helping them through with correcting situations, getting them over to the right management, helping them with rehabs when they need them, things like that, and getting all of those early properties back to a point where they're performing, stabilized, where they can make some decisions whether they want to keep them or, and have them continue to be performing, or if they want to just sell them off, but at least now they have something that's easy to sell off if they want to.
Okay, last one. What's one piece of advice that you'd give to someone just starting out?
I think we've mentioned both of them. It's like, you don't have to know everything, right? Like I have a business partner. The beauty of our relationship is that he's this typical like fire, ready, aim, right? And I'm the guy who's like, no, we got to have systems. We got to do this. We got to be organized. I got to track all this on a spreadsheet. And, like I drive myself nuts with that stuff. It's probably also the reason I'm the CEO and not him, because I'm a lot more detail oriented. But between us, and what I've learned from him is like, we'll just do it. We'll just figure it out. So entrepreneurs are ones that just take action. And again, if they know the problems that they're trying to solve, just keep trying to do a better job of solving their problems. We did not get to the position that we're in by having all of these systems and softwares and portals and things by ignoring our investors' problems. We listened and said, what are the things that are driving you nuts? What are the things that are driving us nuts as turnkey investors? How do we really solve all those? So it's taken us 2 years just to build this. It's not like this was the way it was day one. So, that's the first advice, is just go out and do it and figure it out day by day. Just keep learning, keep asking. You don't have to know everything. What was the other piece you asked me? Because you asked 2 questions, didn't you?
No, I only asked one. So,
okay.
Yeah, what piece of advice would you give to someone just starting out?
That's a good point. I feel like a lot of the time, most people wait until they know about 80 or 90% of what they're trying to do. But I feel like, yes, you do have to know what you're going to do, but then you got to go at like just above maybe like 60% of what it is that you want to do. That's when you should just get going.
That is a great point. I don't remember what book it was in, but I was recently reading some business book, and they were talking specifically about this topic, about CEOs and having to make decisions on a higher level. And what they found was that when CEOs, obviously they rely on their team to gather the data, things like that. But when they're going by their gut and understanding, that zone of that sort of 35 to 55% of the knowledge that they need to make a decision is actually their sweet spot to be it for best decision making. Once they start getting into the 60, 70, 80s, it becomes too much information.
That or it's too late where somebody else already did what you wanted to do.
It's too late, or it's too much analysis, and then you start getting into, analysis paralysis and all that stuff. So
yeah, I read the same thing. I just don't remember where either.
Yeah.
I know I read it somewhere, but it's like I read so many articles and so many books that sometimes I forget where I read something. It's just somewhere in my head. But yeah, man, this was awesome. I really appreciate you giving us your time. Where can people find you guys online? Because I know you also have a podcast, right?
Yeah, so 2 things. I mean, we have this most generic name in the world. It's called High Return Real Estate.
It's awesome.
Our website is highreturnrealestate.com. Our podcast is the High Return Real Estate Show. So it's just really simple. It's kind of generic, but, hey, it works. And, we just started off by providing better returns than a lot of our competitors. So we've just decided that works for us, and that's how people can find us. And it's really pretty simple. And I also want to say thank you to you guys for having me on, because it's I love what you guys are up to. I've listened to a couple of your episodes, and I love the quality of guests you're bringing. I feel honored to be here and love what you guys are up to.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Until next time, guys. And that's it for another episode of the podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. One last thing before you head off, though. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave us your thoughts on iTunes. It would really mean a lot and help us reach more people. You can also find us on Facebook at Profits Over Wages Podcast, as well as on Instagram and YouTube. Until next time.